Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Co-op Connection podcast. In this episode, Patti is joined by Gary Benson from Insurance One. Together, they navigate the hectic world of insurance, including current market conditions, the new normal in premiums, increasing deductibles, and much more. So sit back, crank up that AC, and enjoy.
So Gary, just a few months ago, we were at the Texas Ministry Conference and you were on the HR panel, which, as you know, some questions came up about insurance and they continue to come up. So I thought today we'd take a few minutes to go over some additional questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
One of them is the current market. We know that it's really, the landscape is changing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it started last year predominantly. I think it's been on a series of downhill slides for a little bit, but the last year kind of all came to a head. And a number of insurance companies found themselves in the red over an extended period of time. They actually ran a report recently, a 5-year loss history, and most of the major church carriers were 105, 108% in the red. And that's when they're losing a whole lot of money. The insurance companies typically have a very slim margin. If they're making 5 to 8% profit, they make a lot of money. If they're losing 5 to 8%, they're losing a whole lot of money. And
so they're pulling out.
So they're pulling out. And one of them, the largest church insurance carrier, Church Mutual, made the decision to attempt to write their book. And the only way they could do that is to really cancel a lot of policies, which they did. And then those flooded the market. And so we suddenly became to a capacity problem where the insurance carrier is going, wait, we're getting way more business than we want. And so they started shutting down. So we found ourselves halfway through the year last year with limited to no capacity with any carrier. And then that forced us to go into what we will call the non-standard market, which is higher pricing, higher deductibles, lesser coverage. But that's really all we had to work with. And that has continued into this year. We've seen a glimmer of hope with some, but right now the market is still very, very tight.
And such an impact to church budgets. So we're in a new norm now. What about the premiums in the new norm?
The premiums in the new norm will be higher than we've had in the past. In the past, we've had some very, very competitive rates, very, very competitiveness in the marketplace in general. But I think we're going to see a new, what we call the new normal, which is going to be rates considerably more than they were. I'm going to say easy 20%, probably more. What will be more the average than we've seen in the past. So, and it's tough because insurance is typically the or among the top expenses for a church, and we're very, very sensitive to that. We understand that, but it is going to be an adjustment churches will have to look at.
So going into the new budget year, whenever that begins for these organizations, they should plan on at least 20%.
Oh, minimum. Hopefully, if they keep their insurance. Sadly, we had many conversations last year. If they lost their insurance, the conversation pretty much went like, "I'm so sorry. Prepare for your insurance premiums to double," and that was a shock and awe, to say the least. But those that have retained their insurance have probably seen increases of 20 to 30%.
And when they go in and do a 5-year loss, that includes borough. I mean, it includes some pretty big storms.
Yeah, and the thing to remember is that as much as we think that, Houston area's had limited, we've had a couple hurricanes lately. It is taken from, basically their entire experience. So hurricanes that happen in Florida affect what we do in Texas. And so the coastal regions have really been under the target. Florida, Louisiana, Texas, and California are the top states right now really under scrutiny. And being in the coastal area that we are, Harris and even into Montgomery County has really drawn a lot of attention with capacity. And that's what insurance companies look for, is how much exposure do we have in the event of the big one, right, or a catastrophic loss? What kind of exposure do we have? And that's the reason a lot of them have really pulled the reins back.
So if there was a storm in Florida, is it spread across the nation for rates going up, or is it just a Texas
Well,
thing?
that's a great question. It's kind of a stacking thing. So insurance companies overall have their overall loss ratio. How much did we make or lose money for operating in the U.S., right?
Okay.
And then it's drilled down to state, and then it's drilled down to county. What have we experienced in the state of Texas? And that's why a lot of companies actually pulled down or shut down in Texas because their loss ratios weren't good.
Right.
And then even the more scrutiny, what happened in Harris County, what happened in Montgomery County, or Brazos or whatever, how are we experiencing in that area? We have found that, obviously the further north you go in this area, we get into Montgomery County, up to Walker, Brazos, lessens up a little bit because we don't have quite the exposure that we do in a coastal area. But it all does kind of stack and have an impact on the carriers.
We get hurricanes more in Harris County, but y'all get hail and wind up there, don't you?
Yeah, we're fortunate that we live in an area that doesn't, other than the hurricanes, we've been pretty fortunate. We have hail, but it's not like North Texas. It's very pocket. But we still experience it. And we have we got the hurricanes and we have the straight line winds. So there's some argument that coastal Harris County might even be better than Dallas-Fort Worth. There's probably some logic and argument to that. But again, they kind of prepare for the catastrophic losses, and that's ultimately what they worry about.
So when you go in to insure a church, often they think that it's just, is it replacement, or is it the cost of the materials going up, or how do you put all that together?
Yeah, well, we've seen a great rise in construction cost.
Okay.
It didn't seem to be that long ago that we could build a building for $100, $150 a square foot. And we are seeing those pushing 200 plus now.
Whoa.
Which is, it's a lot of money. And I would say my church is about to enter a building program, and I was already ready. I was kind of going, I already have a figure in my head, and based on the square footage, and it was pretty close. And it was over $200 a square foot. And that, I think a lot of churches are surprised by that. They kind of still think we could build in that lower 100s, and unfortunately that's not the case. And carriers are really pushing for those values to be accurate. And so we've also seen a rise in values, insured values, which affects the cost. So we kind of got increases, a rise in construction costs, rise in deductibles, and it's kind of not been fun.
Yeah. Based on what we've been talking about, so should they be increasing their wind hail deductible?
Well, we're seeing that in the marketplace. I will tell you, it's been interesting to look. 5 years ago, we were setting at pretty much flat deductibles, a $10,000 or $25,000 or something like that. And the insurance carriers started talking about introducing a percentage, 1% wind hail deductible. And I will tell you, we threw a fit. We thought there's just no way churches can handle that kind of expense. And here we are 4 or 5 years later, and 1%, if you get a 1%, hold on to it for, because we're now seeing 2, 3, and 5. And we're seeing more 5s with regularity in the last year or two than anything else, really. And 5% of the insured value is not 5% of the claim. 5% of the insured value is a really big number.
So I wonder how many churches are actually setting that aside on the balance sheet for when something does happen.
I would guess very few.
How many can afford it after paying the insurance, right?
Right, yeah, well, I know. It's tough. There is a way to offset that. We've actually used that several times with some of our churches, and actually have had claims that we've paid from that. It's called a deductible buy-down.
Okay.
So it is a separate policy, and of course it's an additional expense. But if you have something like a 5%, which you'll easily have a 6-figure deductible, typically, you can buy that down through this policy. It's kind of like a gap policy. You may be familiar with that.
Right.
Where you could buy it down to 2%, to 1%, to $25,000. The more you buy down, obviously, the more the premium is. But those are very, very good programs. They work extremely well because basically at the end of the day, when the primary insurance company finishes their claim adjusting, you just send the paperwork to the deductible buy-down company. They calculate the difference and send you a check.
So the buy-down is from a separate company?
It is a separate company. It's
Okay.
a Lloyd's of London company, if anybody gets
Interesting,
technical
yes.
with that. But it is a great tool if you're willing to pay the premium, and it would help you avoid a catastrophic kind of deductible.
Do you have churches signing up more and more for that gap policy?
Well, yeah. I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, we weren't even talking about this product.
Right, it's the first I've heard about it. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, what is that? But yeah, it's slowly, not a lot, but it is slowly becoming something to look at as our deductibles go higher and higher, especially the 5%. You know, at the 1 or 2%, it's going to be tough, but you might could, weather that storm. But the 3s and the 5s get tough.
Oh, it
Real
is.
tough.
I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. Let's talk about when people use your facilities.
Oh, okay.
That's always
Right.
a big one.
Always a big one, right. And we get, the interesting part of with that is when we have other organizations that want to use the church. Now, most churches will tell you, we want to be part of the community, right? We want to be a beacon to the community, right?
Yes.
We want to welcome people in, which is the very nature of churches anyway. And that's okay. But when you have an organization that wants to use your facility, whether it be a school or daycare or whatever, you need to be able to transfer that risk to them. There's a certain amount of responsibility you have to your church and your congregants. So you want to have their insurance respond. And the way to do that, and most people will get a proof of insurance from the other organization. They call it a certificate of liability, and they're usually pretty good about doing that.
Much like we do at the conference when
Much
we
like-
bring in exhibitors and we have them all identify the church.
Right.
And
But you have to take it one step further, and this is where a lot of people really fall down, and it's called an additional insured rider.
Okay.
It is actually an endorsement to their policy
Okay.
that adds your church on as an additional insured. So what that basically means is they become primary by policy. And so that insulates the church. Won't completely exonerate them, but that does insulate the church, allowing the other insurance company to respond first. So you typically want to do a contract, which is a simple facility use agreement will suffice. It's a 1 or 2 page agreement. You put in there the stipulation of insurance. We have samples we're happy to share.
Okay, that was my
And-
next question. Do you
Yeah,
provide that?
We have a lot of forms that we can
Okay,
provide.
good.
They're samples. We always encourage you to have those reviewed by your own legal counsel, but we're happy to provide anything anybody would want. So that's serves as a contract because sometimes the policies have, as required by contract, and that meets that stipulation.
Now, do they do that per event? I'm going to give you an example. Let's just say a church allows the school district
Right.
to have a graduation ceremony at their church. Does that cover just that event, or is it for a period of a year?
Usually per event.
Okay.
Typically, your certificate of insurance will stipulate the dates that
Okay.
this event is to happen, and that's really the best way to do it. So you
Okay.
can get very specific with that.
Good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another subject that affects churches
Yeah.
a lot, and that's sexual abuse
Okay. Wow.
coverage. How is that changing?
Well, we keep thinking it's going to improve, but I think this is one thing that's just not going to improve. It has, Richard Hammer used to track these real carefully, and he labeled it as the number one reason churches went to court, really back to the past 10 years. We are seeing the insurance companies, everybody's different in how they address this, but mostly they really drill down and they want to see that churches are proactive and screening or having programs for those who work with minors. I will tell you the average church, birth through 5th grade, they're Fort Knox, they're locked down. Interesting though, in the adolescents or the teens, we really get loose in what we do. Well, guess where the claims happen? And I will tell you that there's a 80% chance that on any time I have a meeting with a church and I ask them, tell me about your program for working with minors, I will get 9 times out of 10 that we do background checks. That's great. That's awesome. What else are you doing? And that's when I get the deer in the headlights look. Like, what do you mean, what else are we doing?
They did their checklist.
They did their checklist. They did background checks. You know, statistically speaking, background checks, you get a less than 10% chance of ever getting a hit. Mm-hmm. And according to the experts, an actual child molester could molest 20 to 30 kids before they're ever caught.
Well, and they're expunging the records on so many of them just for information.
Correct.
When they let them out.
Correct. So you really got to drill down deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to, it's not a hard program that we're asking you to implement. You really do 4 or 5 key things. Mm-hmm. And implement those and adhere to those. Now, churches don't have a line out the door for volunteers. We understand that, right? And so that's why a lot of churches kind of get desperate, for lack of better words, for looking for volunteers. But I would encourage them to stick to your policy and procedures. And if you do have a written policy and procedure, you better follow it.
Right.
Or you could
just like a personnel policy.
Yeah, exactly. You could really get nailed. So it's not hard, but it does take effort. And so in the long run, it will serve you well.
I've noticed that churches sign up for these online training courses, and there's several out there that are really good. But I always ask them, well, you're learning about the abuse. What would you do if somebody come up on a Sunday morning and said that they had been inappropriately touched by one of the workers or someone else? What is your plan from there? Because that's where it could get you in trouble too.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to have a written response plan.
Right.
And know, even if you have something that gets out into the media, you better know who's going to talk.
Right.
Because you know they're coming out there with a microphone, hoping somebody will say something. So you do need to have a designated spokesperson, and the other staff needs to know what to say, or better, what not to say. Which is usually that's pastors. He'll make a comment on that, but we will not, or something to that effect.
So does your organization, are you training churches? Or?
We do. We offer, sample. We have sample policies if they're interested in those. We have some of our favorites, which are just a few pages long. You don't want a book. You really want some, because you want to be able to share that with somebody and really have them understand it very succinctly. So we're happy to do training. Paula Burns, who I know many people know, works with us, and she's an excellent job in doing that. She loves doing training like that. A lot of times in us, it's just a lot of one-on-one conversations, and we can make available, many of the online resources. Like you said, there's several of those that are very good out there.
There's so many things that come under the umbrella of working with an insurance agent. It's not just having the coverage, it's really getting the expertise and the advice like you provide from your organization. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we're a little bit unique, I think. Insurance One as a whole, we're a very large agency handling pretty much anything from A to Z. But we do have a church and nonprofit division, which in my career specifically, I've pretty much only dealt with churches and nonprofits. And have for 40 plus years now. And so it gives you a level of expertise, a level of understanding of a church. I'm familiar with the church. I go to a church, I know what churches are, I know what their pains are, and more importantly, what kind of coverages that we need to be looking for, or what kind of activities we need to be able to guide a church to do or perhaps not do. Churches there's a lot of things that we understand that they're trying to appeal to the masses, right?
Right.
And they're definitely trying to appeal to a different demographic, and they get very creative sometimes on some things they want to do. So sometimes we really want to guide them in that. Some of the policies have restrictions, and so you want to be very careful on that. We're seeing more and more of those come up. The insurance companies are kind of pushing back a little bit, I'm going, look, this policy was designed to cover a church and normal activities. It wasn't designed to cover the parades and carnivals and different things that you're trying to be creative with. And so it may take that you get a different kind of policy, a special events policy, for example, to cover some of those exposures.
And those are pretty inexpensive, aren't they?
They are, yeah. I mean, they're designed for that. And in some of the activities, they were still challenged to find coverage for. But
the bounce houses.
The bounce houses, bless their hearts. Yes, those are one of the key ones. But I think if you have an agent that's knows the market well, and this is another thing, people always ask us, should we shop around? Should we shop around? It's not like auto and homeowners where you can just pick up the phone and call for a quote. We like to think, well, we're large enough, number one. We have the experience, number two. Yes, we know the market. We know what's available. We know what's not available. So we are very sensitive to this with our customers, and we will shop it for you. If there's a place to go, I'm a coverage first, premium second guy. I don't want to sacrifice coverage, but we'll certainly do that for you. And again, that's our expertise, that we know the marketplace. We know the carriers that could be suitable for you. We perhaps know the carriers that may not be suitable for you.
Like a broker. We first met back in the 80s when I was at Spring Baptist. The thing, and I've used you for insurance ever since. The thing that I've always admired about you and your organization is that you don't come in and just want to sell me a policy. You want to come in and get a good fit for the organization, and we'll spend the time to research that and really do a good job matching. I can't say enough about that. And you're very unique, because I was working with other insurance agents when I met you, and boy, I knew immediately what a difference it was. So I'm hoping that our churches will, that are not using you, will spend some time with you to get to know the difference.
Well, and I appreciate that. It is something that is really sincere. I am happy to, and I have done many times, review a policy and going, you know what, either A, I can't help you, or B, you need to stay right where you're at. And the difficulty these days right now is, do we have a place we can even go?
Right.
And sometimes it's kind of like, I'd love to help you, but I don't have anything else better for you. And I've done that a number of times, and I have no problem recommending if they need to stay where they are, or even if they stay where they are, please ask your agent about adding this coverage or this coverage.
Right.
Because you have a deficit there. And so I appreciate that. It is our heart to serve the church. It really is.
Thank you for joining us. Please feel free to reach out to Gary personally with his information provided below, or for more information about Insurance One, please visit our website, www.churchcoop.org.